What's up, Super Fiends? It's I with a Bow, and today we'll be going over the first Provisional Showdown hosted by Carta Magica, where 240 plus players came out to battle it out for the title of champion, and Kevin Broberg came out on top with Jiro Kirishima Void. Congratulations to Kevin Broberg. Our video today is going to be over the data portion of the tournament, and in a tournament there's always just more than data. There's the pilots, their skill level, and then luck involved. But what we'll be focusing on is the data part. So as you can see, we have our little graphic here, and that's going to be the top 16 breakdown, and half of the field is Kirishima. The other half are other characters that I'll be sharing my thoughts on, how I feel about them and why they got there. And for those of you who are better at visuals, I'll show you this top 16 list. So this is all the pictures here, and also the name of the players that made it into tops. So congratulations to them, they did very well, and here are your top 16. So again, shout outs to all of them, they did very well. That is your top 16. That being said, let's get into their deck list. So this is the deck list portion of the data, and I will leave a link in the description below for all of you. And one thing you would like to know is that when we're concerned about the Kirishimas, they have two of them are good symbol, the other two are earth symbol, and then the last four are void. So you can take it however you want it, but to me this means that the void symbol is the more aesthetic pleasing for the Kirishima players, but there are the Kirishima players that like to go to good and like to go to earth, and they all have their difference of playstyle and what you can get out of them. So for example, when we're thinking about Kirishima, for me, what I think of the void symbol is you have a deck that doesn't have that great of the block mods, but you also have access to 8 throws. You also have a card that I think came out MVP this weekend, which is Hardened Frenzy. And the reason why Hardened Frenzy is so good is because it is always a lose-lose situation for your opponent when they see it on the field. So that being said, I think that card is very hyped, and I'm going to be maining 4 of it next time. But more so talking about the Void players, they have access to the throws, they have access to Hardened Frenzy, so that's already a very strong attack lineup. And then in addition, I think that the reason why we play Void is because we have access to Night Watch, which cancel enhances, and then we also have access to Fulfilled My Duty. And this is really good against the Kyoka Jiro matchups. And Kyoka Jiro matchups, if you've played against them, you'll notice a lot of them are under the air symbol, and they'll also run Home Run Comment, and that's their kill condition. Well, when you have a deck like that uses all into one attack, well, the Void build can make that whole strategy into a fault. And how we do this is we have cards like Night Watch and we have cards like Fulfilled My Duty, and those cards significantly shut down Home Run Comment. You're not able to buff it up to crazy numbers of stats if we have that card on the board. And Jiro, realistically, they only have a few cards that can turn off those foundations that stop their game plan. So that being said, and playing the Void build myself, I was able to clutch it out against my Jiro opponents because of that. And it is always something that when the Jiro player sees it, they have to try and figure out something to do. So that's the Void build. The Earth build is very aesthetic because you have cards access to Apathetic. So Apathetic allows you to flip foundations, and we saw something in the top 16, top 8 matches where we had Andrew Duvall playing Earth Kirishima and was recycling Apathetic to flip the opponent's foundations, and then Chris Bromley also toughed it out. So this was a really neat match in the top 16, top 8, and it also showcases why the Earth symbol is good, is because you have the access to control some defense, and that's Kirishima. The good symbol is, in my opinion, probably the most aggressive symbol, because you have access to Texas Smash you have access to full cowlings, which allows you to draw more. And then you also see these players that play the good symbol. I've personally noticed them have a very aggressive play style, and it's backed by them having some really good block zones. So when they pick up a foundation, a lot of their foundations have a +1 high, +1 low, and then their mids are usually +2, or they'll have access to plus ultra. So regardless, the good symbol has some really good block mods. The good symbol has the best block mods to defend with, and that's going to usually be very daunting to a lot of players, because you'll see this Kirishima player, they're coming at you, they're hitting you with a bunch of attacks, and you're trying to hit them back, but when you try to, they'll usually block a lot of your attacks without having much speed reduction. Even though they have access to speed reduction, they don't really need it because of the strong block modifiers. So that's Kirishima in a nutshell, and all three of his symbols, and how I feel about each one of them. I think that they're very solid. I think they have different tools available to them depending on which symbol you pick, but as you can see, that's half the field. Now, we talked about Kirishima a lot. What are we thinking about the other half of top 16? And one thing that I come to notice about playing in this tournament and how I feel about the meta currently from my experience in the Provisional is I'm starting to think that we are in a aggro meta, where if you are having a aggressive play style, and if you look at top 16, I think that all the decks here have a way to become very aggressive, and more likely than not are trying to be very aggressive to win their games. And the only deck I feel like you could say that they're defensive or not very aggro is, I would say, Chris Bromley's Kamui Woods, and then also Daniel Nelson's Fumikage Tokuyami. Now, why are these decks could be seen as non-aggro? Well, first off, Chris Bromley's deck is playing Kamui Woods, which is known for their very strong defense. But what I've noticed about his list is you have a 20 plus attack lineup where you're having a lot of attacks to come to, and at any point in time you can go into your opponent, and these are some attacks that help you get more aggressive, like frog lashing. But realistically, all of the rest of the foundations are very defensive, and the playstyle can be defensive. But what I've noticed with this build is that this is a very aggressive build. And let's actually pull it up here. Let's see, Waterworks, here it is. So yeah, we have 23 attacks here, and you know, as I said before, the frog lashings to help you ready foundations, but the foundations is what makes this deck very defensive. This is a callback to when he got second place with Shoto Todoroki, but instead of playing Todoroki in the main and now it's in the side, we have Kamui Woods. So with Kamui Woods, you have the option to go offensive and defense at a snap moment's notice. So you don't have to play the grind game, but with Todoroki, you usually have to play the grind game. So this was a very interesting pick, and I think that Chris Bromley did a very good job representing Kamui Woods, showing that this character can be defensive and offensive. So it's that really nice balance. And I also consider this type of deck, the build, the Kirishima killer. I actually thought that Chris Bromley was a very strong Kirishima killer in the event that he went second place in the PPG 1K. And with this build, you're maining 4 Irrefutable Force of Nature. This is so that you can beat the brakes off of any Kirishima player that you're going to match up against. So Chris Bromley definitely put all of his eggs in the basket for that matchup. And, you know, there's other matchups where this card is also good, but having this as a 4x against the Kirishimas is very powerful. So shout outs to Chris Bromley for showcasing that. I think this was an awesome list. And then now going on to Fumikage Tokuyami, why is that deck more defensive, can we say? I actually don't think that the deck has a lot of defense, especially when it's under the fire symbol. You have access to defensive cards, but generally the deck is not fit to be defensive. And why I'm saying this is because the deck only runs 17 attacks, which is kind of below average for your 18 attacks. 18 attacks is your average. And with 17 attacks, that's showing us that there's not a lot of attacks, but you can see we play 2 signature right swings and 2 latent skills. So that means that you're able to cycle. And I think this one is the most interesting one for me, because I'm not very familiar with Tokoyami as a whole. Like, I can't tell you pretty much everything about the deck, but I will say that it just flew under my radar. So seeing it in top 16 is very interesting to me. Tokoyami is known as a offensive character, so I would say that this is an offensive deck, but the stats are a little bit different. I think that, you know, with 17 attacks, it's showing that Daniel is ratioing his deck into lower attacks so that way you don't check as bad, but I'm sure that the playstyle is aggressive and that he's using the deck in ways to really enhance the defense. Because if you look, we got 2 Evil Gaze, we can use that for the mid block, we can also use it for Foundation Destruction. We have 2 copies of Fulfilled My Duty, which end the enhanced step for any problematic attack. I think this card is very strong in the meta, especially against Giro decks. So I like how we have that as an option. And then we also have 2 copies of Irrefutable Forces of Nature, which is essential in the Kirishima matchup. We also have 2 more on the side, and I believe that's for the Kirishima matchup. So realistically, now that I'm starting to look at this deck more, it's definitely looking like another Kirishima killer. So shout outs to Daniel. And let's start looking at the rest of the decks, which I feel are aggressive decks. And this one is the only Ochako 2-dot. I thought Ochako 2-dot was going to see more in top cuts, because it's been very strong lately, I feel, and that it's really, in my opinion, a upgraded version of Nomu. And that's because I feel like you're having access to high health, good offense, but with Ochako you have more speed, and you also have more hand advantage because you're able to replay and attack. So what I like about this list is we're playing 3 copies of Specialized Sound Waves, which I think is perfect. I think 3 copies means that you're going to see it at some point in the game, and when you do see it and you have a momentum, it allows you to go into an additional attack. And it also lets you pick up something that you really need. So if you needed like a home run comment and your opponent had no more blocks, and you could dump out all of your momentum for some big damage, that's one way to go. You could also pick up Indiscriminate Shock to give a bajillion damage. It's really player's choice. But the fact of the matter is that this is a really cool card that allows you to pick up an attack when you need it, and when you're a 5-hand size with not too much draw available to you, and you're not Kirishima, this is one way for you to have access to attacks in a snap moment's notice, is if you were Kirishima. So really nice to see that this Ochako came in with the tech. So I really like Specialized Sound Waves in Ochako. So congratulations to John Stone. Next up we have, let's see, that's another Kirishima. Okay, All Might 2, and this is piloted by Jacob Johnson. Shout out to Jacob Johnson, an Omaha player. And this is a 30 attack deck, but granted the deck has 80 cards in it. So I really like that this is 30 attacks, because it's showing that the deck is having a lot of different variety. So when you draw an attack card, you can be drawing out of a lot of different attacks. There's 8 different attacks here, so you have a lot of options. But why are we playing 30 attacks? The reason why we're playing 30 attacks is because of All Might's mill ability, and then you also have Frigid Heat Wave, which is a 4x and allows you to draw 2 cards. So by playing this playstyle, this will allow All Might to have a lot of draw advantage, and then All Might already has damage buffs. And if you can get some momentum, this will also help you draw even more cards. So I really like that. And the next cool thing is there's a lot of checks and progressive difficulty manipulation. So if you look, there's 4 Crow and Frog takedowns. That makes attacks cheaper to play. And with All Might, if you're going to be drawing, giving additional damage and such, these are very essential. Same thing with Massive Flash Freeze. This is a card that doesn't really see a whole lot of play, but the reason why we see it here is because it helps you play more attacks, and the only thing it's really lacking is damage, because it has the speed, it has the block mod, it's a very neat card. And with All Might, by giving it damage, and the damage can range from 2 to 4 depending on if your opponent blocked or not, that makes massive flash freeze very good. And I'm really happy that Jacob Johnson showcased this deck, because it's definitely one that needed some recognition. We also play 3 copies of Nitro Explosion Ignition. This is the Bakugo SR, and I like seeing this because this could give any of your attacks powerful, and it also can cheat the progressive difficulty. So very nice to see it here in this list. And yeah, this is definitely a aggro deck, and it has a lot of different things that you can use, and obviously 4 Irrefutable Force of Nature. This is a very big trend here. Very MVP card. That's the Kirishima killer card. So if you don't have your playset of Irrefutable Forces of Nature and you want to kill those Kirishimas and you're playing any of those symbols, pick them up now. Next we have Jiro, right? Yeah, Jiro. So we have Air Jiro, and Air Jiro is usually very good against Kirishima, and I think that it's good against all the Kirishimas except for the Void ones. The Void ones have a little bit more tools in their kit to defend against this matchup. And that being said, what you would do is you would use those, like I said earlier, the Night Watches, the Fulfilled My Duties, to stop their home run comments. But yeah, Jiro is just very hard to deal with, very aggressive, big damage, and it is a good counter to most Kirishimas. So pretty much your standard list is what I'm seeing here. I don't really see anything too spicy, but definitely a strong Air Jiro build. So shout outs to Clinton Thomas. I like that. We've already went over Tokiyami. Okay, All Might 3, this is Sam Tate's deck. And we have your standard 18 attacks, but I played against this deck myself, and the one thing I noticed about this deck is that it kinda is like playing Kirishima but not playing Kirishima. And why do I say that? I think that Kirishima himself, you know, when you're playing Kirishima, you have a lot of access to cards, and so does All Might. But the difference here is, I think that All Might commits himself in one foundation, and you draw 2 cards. Those are going to be obviously blank. You're not going to know what you're going to draw into. Kirishima gets to selectively pick from the foundations and then, you know, pick those up. So with Kirishima, you get to pick which cards go into your hand, but you lose foundation base. All Might's different. You don't know what you're going to get from the draw, but you don't also lose any foundations on the board either. But both characters, they give damage, and Kirishima can build a foundation every turn. So realistically, you know, I think that me seeing All Might 3 played this way with Sam Tate's deck, it really reminds me of Kirishima, and also why it's in the sideboard as well. So that being said, I think that if you wanted another way to play a deck that keeps up with Kirishima and kind of has a similar game plan, I would definitely say All Might 3 is the character, and you can play it in 2 other symbols that Kirishima doesn't have access to, such as Air and such as All. But I think the good symbol is probably the right call, and that's because you have access to a lot of different Kirishima attacks, and then the good package, which good has a lot of different tools. So really good deck list there. And next up we have Kirk Polka with All Might 4, and this one, I would not believe it if you told me that this was going to top. And I'm not saying that to diss the deck. This was something created by Shane Duckworth, Barry Everson on the stream, and I was kind of there for it. And Kirk Polka, shoutouts to Kirk Polka for taking this deck list and making it into top cuts, because making it into top cuts was very hard. You know, if you were playing in this event, you would have to go 6-2. So you're only allowed 2 losses in an 8-round event. And if you look at this deck list, it's very, very different. You're playing 19 attacks and 16 foundations. You play more attacks than you do foundations, and you play 15 character cards. This deck is pretty insane. And you know, I've never really played against this deck or played with it, but thinking about it in my head and playing it out, what I've noticed is what you're really doing here is you are playing foundations the first turn, and then second turn you start attacking. That's when you pass the first check. You're able to just filter your hand, give all of your attacks damage, and then while you're filtering, it allows you to play like a normal deck, because what you're doing is you're drawing into either more attacks or foundations or more character cards. So the only way that you can really lose with this deck is if you discard a character card and then you draw into a character card and you just brick. But if you shuffle very well enough and you have the right ratios, I think that this deck can filter itself out and then play itself like a normal deck. And what's nice is it's going to be very consistent, because what you're drawing into is some cards that you set yourself up for. So you're always gonna see Coordinateds, I feel like, Bonds of Friendships, Good Impressions, and Destined for Mainstream Successes, but you're also gonna be seeing a lot of your attacks. So I feel like this is a deck that looks very eccentric, but it's also very consistent. So if this looks like your play style, it's definitely on a different engine, but I think it topping and thinking it out in my head, I do think that this type of play style is consistent. That's the key, because you wouldn't really think it otherwise. So again, shout outs to Kirk Polka and Shane Duckworth for, you know, making the deck, and then Kirk topping with it. Next up, we have another Air Giro, and this one's kind of hard to see. So I'll go ahead and bring this in real quick. Okay. So here is the Air Giro list, and it looks pretty much the same as the other one. I don't really see anything too spicy. It's just your average Air Giro list. And yeah, shout outs to Wesley Bittner getting it done with Jiro. And one thing I will say about Jiro that was really neat is that with Jiro's one of the only characters that had an errata for the webcam events, and this is because normally it's the Jiro player gets to look at the top two cards of the opponent and also your own, but in the webcam event you have to reveal to your opponent the top two cards of their deck, because you can't force them to show it to the camera and then they're not looking, because they pretty much have to look. So that being said, a lot of players thought this was a nerf, but you know, Jiro's still kicking butt and taking names, and I think that says a lot. And that's all of our top 16, and there's a lot of controversy. There's some players saying that, you know, Kirishima makes sense, such and such, but there's also a lot of players out there that are saying, dang, this character has like 50% in top 8, and then in top 4 it was all Kirishimas as well. And you know, realistically, what the discussion is, does Kirishima need to be, you know, penalized somehow? Is he tier 0? Tier 0 means that the character is so far beyond stronger than anyone else, and there's almost no reason to not play this character. So if that's the case, then, you know, what do we do about it? Tier 0 means that it's on a tier of its own. And let me know what you think in the comments about this event, Asia or Kirishima. And if you're new to the channel, please leave a like, a sub, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Have a good one.